The Stalkers were the biggest threats, massing 85 tons and packing an impressive array of missile launchers and lasers. Even one of those monsters would have been more than Lowry's already battered Shadowhawk could handle. The Stalkers were having some trouble with the grade on the slope of the ridge. There was a lot of loose gravel, and their digitigrade legs reversed in cant from the plantigrade stance of a humanoid mech like the Orion or Lowry's Hawk, were having trouble getting a solid climbing purchase. When her Shadowhawk had appeared above the ridgetop, however, both Stalkers had shifted their cigar-shaped torsos back in their cradle of their hip assemblies, canting upward to bring both lasers and missiles to bear. LRMs and SRMs crashed into Lowry's left and center torso. Operation Excalibur, page 76, by William H. Keith, Jr. When people look back at the Star League years, they often see it as a golden age. While the technological development was clear and the perceived unity of the great houses can't be overlooked, the view of the Star League is inevitably colored by the events that took place in just the last few decades before the Ameris coup and the Succession Wars. The trials and tribulations of the Star League paled in comparison to the nightmare and heartache which would follow the League's destruction, so it's only natural to look back in fondness at less turbulent times. If we want a more accurate view of the Star League, we would do well to look at its foundations long before the Civil War or Kerensky had any hand in it. Our story of the Stalker begins as the Star League was still finding its purpose and facing an almost insurmountable challenge of organizing billions of citizens under a common cause. Naturally, it didn't take long for Ian Cameron and his advisors to identify the most effective common cause was identifying an acceptable enemy which could bring the great houses together. The plucky periphery nations had received the suggestions that they join the Star League with tepid, if not cold, responses. These nations often carried a legacy of individualism and independence, which was not easily negated through lucrative trade offers and promises of mutual defense. It all boiled down to one of the most childish and lowest common denominator arguments. If you weren't on the side of the Star League, then you must be against it. Though such pedestrian arguments fail under even light scrutiny, the propaganda value of offering people an enemy on which they can focus their anger was a tantalizing tactic that the great houses and the Camerons couldn't pass up. In the early years of the Star League, there were significant issues with organizing such a massive state apparatus. Efforts to demilitarize house armies caused unforeseen problems, and the creation of a new threat on the horizon helped mitigate those effects. Former soldiers who had turned to banditry or just skirted society trying to find a place suddenly had the opportunity to find work in planetary militias on border worlds or even become mercenaries, working for regional leaders to keep military power off of official books. Now at this point you might be asking, what does any of this have to do with the Stalker? The answer is found in the chaos that was the SLDF logistics network going into the Reunification War. Though many imagine the SLDF as it was in the 28th century under General Kerensky, the early years were rough for the Terran hegemony turned Star League military. Assembling and equipping 30 divisions of mixed mechs, aerospace fighters, tanks, and infantry and moving them hundreds of light years to where they needed to be at a specific time was a daunting exercise in logistics that would only get more difficult as militaries rapidly started growing with war on the horizon. Though the SLDF could field huge numbers of mechs, including classic designs like the Warhammer, Victor, and Phoenix Hawk, the production of these designs would prove not to be fast enough to meet the demands of a conflict so large that it would span the inner sphere. Thankfully, the noble and patriotic defense contractors rose to the occasion and selflessly offered their wares to help fill the ranks of the SLDF. Thankfully, their efforts were rewarded with generous SLDF contracts. One of those companies, which has only a limited presence in modern historical records, was Triad Technologies. When the call went out for a new assault battlemech, Triad met it with their unorthodox Stalker design. Though many of the early battlemech designs had a very humanoid appearance, the STK-3F looked more like a graceless and armless walking blob of missiles and lasers. It was a purely utilitarian move, and Triad leaned into it with their promotional material which boasted, "It's not flashy, it's not cutting edge, it just keeps coming." With the SLDF facing a much more difficult conflict in their attempts to bring the periphery nations into the Star League fold, the offer for an assault mech that was rugged, reliable, and not overly complicated was extremely appealing. The contract was won and production began. The first Stalkers walked off the assembly lines in 2594, and in the centuries since, it has become a workhorse assault battlemech for all of the Great House militaries. Constructed from a Titan H1 chassis wrapped around a 255-strand fusion engine, the Stalker was, from its bones, a plodding killer. What it lacked in speed it made up for with a solid 13.5 tons of Valiant standard plate armor and a collection of weaponry that promised copious amounts of incoming fire at all ranges. Starting at long range, a pair of Jackson B-5C long-range missile launcher 10s were split between the mech's arms, if they could even be called that, as they lacked lower arm and hand actuators. Each launcher was fed by its own single ton of ammunition stored with the launcher. This presented a threat of considerable damage in the case of an ammunition critical hit, but it was figured that most of the time, those LRM-10s would run dry, or nearly so, early on in a battle. In a more direct path toward conflict resolution, 2 Magna Mark III large lasers were installed into the mech, one in each side torso. Though not as intimidating as particle projection cannons, the large lasers offered a reliable and consistent source of damage on target. Anyone not familiar with the Stalker who believed they could get close and treat it like any other fire support battlemech was surprised when hit with 4 Magna Mark II medium lasers split between the arms and 2 Thunderstroke short-range Missile 6 racks set into the side torsos. Each launcher was fed by its own ton of ammunition, so 15 shots apiece. The Stalker's 20 single heat sinks were woefully incapable of handling the heat generated by an Alpha strike while on the move, but that tactic was rarely ever employed anyway. It was expected that the Stalker's Mechwarrior would group the weapons in different ways, which could be applied when most beneficial. In the long and mid-range, the LRM-10s and large lasers would do most of the work, and when close, medium lasers and SRM-6s will do most of the heavy lifting. Firing all 4 medium lasers and the SRM launchers left the Stalker 3F at heat neutral at a standstill or +2 on the run, so that's just awesome. One could even throw in one of the large lasers and a Hail Mary if you didn't need to run very far the next turn. This time, Dipstick didn't hold fire when her targeting reticule tracked the enemy. Even in retreat, the Panther was fair game, unlike a pilot in an ejection seat. The Panther pilot had been happy to hound her with 3 buddies, hyenas trying to take down a wounded animal, so she was more than happy to give back now that the tables had turned. "Sometimes a wounded lion can still bite," she whispered the words as she squeezed her triggers, a brace of lasers punishing the Panther and finding its ammo bin. "Enemy down." Nothing but static answered her hail to Grayman. "Gray?" Dipstick tracked the devastated Panther until it smashed into the side of a building, then looked down at her sensors. She sighed when she realized his IFF transponder had stopped flashing. All Those Left Behind, Shrapnel No. 10, page 40, by Steve P. Vincent. The one fancy feature of the original production run Stalkers was a targeting and tracking system which could automatically sort out what the best combination of weapons and timing were for maximizing the mech's damage output. Though this technology would not survive the succession wars, it did give the Stalker an edge for a few centuries, as it had to carve out its place during the Star League. Battle reports suggested that the Stalker excelled in close-range brawling and performed exceptionally in urban environments. The tough assault could crash through buildings without any concern for serious damage. As the Reunification War went from a glorious conflict that promised soldiers would be home by Christmas into a brutal chain of war crimes and defiant last stands, rugged mechs like the Stalker were crucial to the success of the SLDF. Sales for the Stalker were not limited to the Star League, and as time passed, our noble assault mech could be found in every major house military, mercenary units, and even out into the periphery. Often the Stalker would end up being the core of heavy cavalry frontline units that saw the most action and put the mech to the test. Due to its slow speed, the Stalker was often found in units devoted to defensive operations. In 2787, the Draconis Combine deployed a contingent of Stalkers as a defensive wall intended to blunt the advance of the AFFS during the Battle of Safel. Locked into a back-and-forth LRM tossing contest with House Davion trebuchets and archers, the Combine Stalkers emptied their ammo bins and began to fall back. Thinking they had the fight in the bag, the Davion mechs advanced, only to discover the Stalkers were lying in wait. Sporting pitted but otherwise solid armor plating, the Stalkers unloaded on the Davion mechs with medium lasers and SRM volleys. Galen landed with his back to the wall as the Goliath disappeared from view. Off to his left, Eidenhofer's stalker reared up and started a quick pivot to the right to come around and face the mechs in the rear. His effort, born of desperation, was the only thing a non-jumping mech could do in that situation, yet it exposed his damaged right flank to both Galen and Kai. Galen gladly sent a flight of LRMs at him and followed up with the medium laser built into his mech's left arm. Had he decided to turn and face the stalker, he could have brought all of his weapons to bear, but that would have put him in Kai's line of fire, and he had no desire to do that. "Here you go, Eidenhofer. Art this." Galen's missiles all landed dead on target. 5 dove through the hole others had previously opened in the right flank and detonated. Assumption of Risk, page 190, by Michael A. Stackpole. In a first for this channel's coverage of battle mechs, some of the first refits for the Stalker included removing one or both LRM-10s entirely from the battle mech and not replacing them with anything. Apparently, there were reports that the Stalker's frame suffered a decline in structural integrity over extended use and time. Removing a few weapons to lighten it was a common path to alleviate that stress. These refits varied in which weapons were removed, but it is interesting in that I don't recall ever reading anything like this from other BattleMech lore. The only other official Stalker variant that came out of the Triad Technologies lines on Pollux was the STK-3H, which was introduced in 2638 before the company's destruction. The specific source and date of that destruction is unclear from the available information, however there are 2 likely possibilities. The first being 2767, likely during the assault by Stefan Amaris's Rimworld's forces. The second possibility is considerably later in 2855, placing it firmly as a Succession Wars casualty, likely due to the actions of the Free Worlds League. Big thanks to Joshua Perrian for doing that lore digging to offer at least a little clarity. We got ahead of ourselves a bit, so let's talk about this Stalker 3H. As previously mentioned, the 3H debuted in 2638 and reflected an attempt to focus the battlemech on a more specific role. The structure of the 3H wasn't changed from the original, it kept the 20 single heat sinks, the 13.5 tons of armor, etc. Instead, the mech's 2 large lasers were pulled in favor of upgrading the LRM-10s to LRM-20s. While one might be tempted to suggest this makes the Stalker more of a fire support mech, the single ton of ammunition for each launcher leaves very little margin for error. With just 6 shots per LRM-20, if the 3H were operating as a fire support mech, it would need to be very close to logistics lines for resupply. While the Stalker 3H has a clear use as a long-range lobber of LRMs, it's on an extremely short leash that limits its battlefield effectiveness. It's due to this that I personally would not take this variant into battle. Though Triad Technologies passed the way of the Dodo, the Stalker would live on thanks to Irian Battlemechs Limited on Shiro 3, Trailshire Heavy Industries on Twycross, and other companies later on down the timeline. The 2876 4N variant for the Stalker sought to improve the mech's ability to shed heat in exchange for sacrificing one of the LRM-10 launchers. While this of course cut the long-range firepower, it made the Stalker 4N deadlier at mid and short ranges with consistent fire. The 26 single heat sinks allowed for the firing of all 4 medium lasers, both SRM-6s and one of the large lasers, and still remain very much in the fight. Leaving a large laser out of the mix allows for heat-neutral firing of the short-range weaponry while on the run, which is quite dangerous for a Stalker's prey. As far as Succession Wars era refits go, the Stalker 4N is a dangerous opponent if it can get into close range. The downsides are considerable, as with any 350 battlemech, so supporting units would be crucial for survival. Frutchley came up alongside as an enemy Stalker moved to cut off their advance. Stalkers had a reputation for firepower and armor, and most mech warriors preferred to avoid the massive assault machines, but it didn't look like the young officer had much chance of dodging this one. As if to confirm that fact, the mech let loose a storm of long-range missiles directly at Frutchley's Warhammer. Highlander Gambit, page 273 and 274, by Blaine Lee Pardoe. While the Stalker 3N was not the last of the Succession Wars refits, it is a pretty good example of the trend. Often a weapon here or there was sacrificed to boost the effectiveness of the others. We're going to step away from the fray and take a leap forward, as there is still a lot to cover and your time is extremely valuable. When Irian Battlemechs Unlimited decided to throw their hat into the ring and create their own Stalkers, it was a good opportunity to take advantage of the Helm core technologies that were increasingly changing battlefields following the end of the Third Succession War. After a considerable redesign process and retooling their production lines on Shiro 3, the first Stalker 5M stomped into existence. The changes made were remarkably reasonable and reinforced the existing strengths of the Battlemech. It retained the standard 255 fusion engine, but boosted the armor coverage to 14.5 tons. Additionally, the heatsinks were upgraded to the double-strength variety. The 17 double heatsinks brought 3 additional tons of mass for other treats, while still vastly improving the mech's ability to shed heat. The weapons loadout for the Stalker 5M looked a lot like the original, with a pair of Irian Weapons Works LRM-10 launchers in the arms, 2 Irian-produced SRM-6s in the side torsos, and 4 standard Magnum Mark II medium lasers split between the mech's arm nubs. In a move so shocking to this creator that I had apparently forgotten about it, the 2 standard large lasers were swapped out for just a single Diverse Optics Sunbeam ER large laser. Yep, you heard that right. They didn't cram in a second one to try to take advantage of the double heat sinks. If you need a minute to calm down, I understand. Just pause the video and step outside for a minute to get your bearings. We'll all wait for you. The 2 other significant changes to the loadout were an additional 2 tons of ammunition for the LRM launchers and the installation of a NARC missile beacon launcher in the left torso and fed by 2 tons of beacons, or 12 shots. After nearly 500 years of service, the Stalker received a worthy and powerful upgrade. Of all of the Helm memory core refits and variants, this is one of the best, in my humble opinion. The 5M's only serious flaw was the lack of case anywhere in the design. With ammunition in both side torsos and the arms, and little prospect of firing all of it before getting into the fray, the 5M had to hedge its bets in a brawl. Sooner or later, if a target was able to survive the incoming fire and hit back, the Stalker's Mechwarrior was going to need to count on surviving an ammunition explosion. Most of the Stalker 5Ms produced ended up within the Free Worlds League and their allies and friendly mercenary commands. A considerable number were also sold within the Federated Commonwealth, but as we will see, they'll have their own take on the design in short order. Ilkasur Shogunate, Clan Steel Viper, High Orbit over West Arcadia, Arcadia, Pentagon Worlds, 15th July 2821, D-Day plus 13. The 85-ton Stalker halted at the edge of the large clearing in the dense woods, only a few days' hard march from the city of Quito. As discussed, it immediately began powering down. "Honorable," Sakon Stephen Breen said from the confines of his own mech. "Are you surprised?" Star Captain Survey Thibodeau responded across the comm. "No, I guess not. Not after 2 weeks of fighting this Ilkasur Shogunate. I suppose you need to determine what she wants?" "Aye, Survey. That I do. Keep an eye on things." "I always do." Land of Dreams, page 227, by Randall N. Bills. The STK-5S also debuted in 3050, and it sure is a thing. Taking a radical departure from previous Stalker precedent, a 255 XL engine was installed into the design to buy mass for other upgrades. The armor remained at 13.5 tons of standard plate, and the 20 single heatsinks were not touched. We'll get back to those in a bit. Oh boy. Much of the weapons loadout was left the same from the original 3F, except for the 2 large lasers, which were upgraded to the large pulse variety. This cut down on range and increased heat generation in exchange for accuracy and 9 damage apiece. Additionally, an anti-missile system was installed into the left torso along with 1 ton of its ammunition. Both the left and right torso were protected by case, which is good, yet it won't save the gigantic repair bill should one side blow up thanks to the XL engine criticals there anyway. The biggest issue with the Stalker 5S was that it stacked short-range weapons at the cost of mid-range, and can't fire all of them consistently anyway thanks to the single heatsinks. Firing just the 2 large pulse lasers while on the run left the mech at +2 heat into the red. Adding even one of the SRM-6s will start the heat effect penalties. Kerensky forbid you fire all 4 medium lasers and the 2 SRM-6s along with the pulse lasers. That would put you at 22 plus heat into the red if you were on the run. You could do that in a last-ditch attempt to take out a target, but the mech would be nearly stationary as a result and risk an ammunition explosion on a 4+ roll. Good thing that mech has case, right? I try not to be mean, but the Stalker 5S is not a great machine. Thank all that is holy that it is not the only Helm core variant. Our next take on the Stalker was a one-off design piloted by a Wolf's Dragoon colonel named Elliot Jameson. The Stalker he piloted for years as the CO of Zeta Battalion was a classic Succession Wars variant until 3054, when the mask dropped on the Dragoons and he accepted a Clan Tech refit. The resulting design, which was named after him, is a testament to the incredible advantages that clan-grade technology has over the Inner Sphere. Though the base Stalker 3F wasn't messed with too much, including the standard engine, the 3F Jameson received 18 Clan double heatsinks and 13.5 tons of Clan ferrofibrous armor. That was 259 points of protection over the original 3F's 216. We're off to a great start, and we haven't even gotten to the weapons yet. Speaking of, the loadout is reminiscent of the original, with 4 Clan ER medium lasers split evenly between the arms and a pair of Clan LRM-20s next to them, each fed by 1 ton of ammunition. In the side torsos, 2 Clan large pulse lasers sit pretty next to a pair of Streak SRM-6s, each fed by 1 ton of ammunition. Both arms and both side torsos benefited from Clan case. With its 18 Clan double heatsinks, the Jameson Stalker could fire its large pulse lasers, ER medium lasers, and LRM-20s at mid-range while on the run, and still only end up at 18 plus heat into the red. While not great, it would still be manageable in the right moment. Adding in the 2 Streak SRM-6s and assuming a lock, while dropping the LRM-20s from the mix, would be 14 plus into the red, which would leave the Stalker in an inaccurate mess, but the next turn would be without an ammo explosion risk. The STK-3F Jameson is an incredible machine. Its limited ammunition with the LRM-20s might be the only significant downside, but hopefully whatever you're shooting 240 missiles at will be softened up enough for the win by the time you get into ER medium laser range. If you have a chance, take the Jameson Stalker out for a spin in Megamech. Minutes seemed to stretch into hours as one mech after another was ground into scrap by the murderous fighting in the pass. Though most of the machines engaged in the bloody close-quarters fighting were heavy or assault class, both the Inner Sphere and the Smoke Jaguars had suffered heavy damage in earlier battles, damage that had yet to be repaired. As a result, mechs that should have been able to withstand a storm of enemy fire were felled as quickly as light or medium mechs might have been. A bright explosion lit up the gap as a Stalker, its missile bins breached by enemy fire, was consumed in a massive explosion. A remote portion of Winston's mind noted that the pilot did not eject. Another dead man on her conscience. Shadows of War, Twilight of the Clans, Volume 6, page 219, by Thomas S. Gressman. Leaping down the timeline to 3062, the Stalker 6M took another crack at creating a long-range fire support version of the BattleMech. This time, the twin arm-mounted LRM-15s were aided by Artemis IV fire control systems and fed by 3 tons of ammo per launcher. 2 of each were nestled in case-protected side torsos. An ER large laser was nestled into the center torso to add to that long-range fire. Finally, 5 ER medium lasers were installed, 2 in each arm and 1 in the open head critical location. With a standard fusion engine and case, the Stalker 6M was less susceptible to catastrophic disassembly due to ammunition explosions, and those 18 double heatsinks were plenty for long-range use and decent for close-range squabbles. Firing all 5 of the ER medium lasers and the ER large generated 37 heat, leaving the 6M at 3 plus heat into the red if you're on the run. Not shabby at all. With 16.5 tons of standard plate armor, if forced into a brawl, the 6M can endure for quite a while. If you were looking for a fire support Stalker in its ideal form, you would do well to try out the 6M. It's about as solid as you can get without doing some extensive tinkering or risking it all with an XL engine. In the same year, the Davions took a crack at creating their own Stalker to fit their needs. Oddly enough, it doesn't include slapping on gigantic autocannons, so don't get your hopes up. Wisely, the standard engine was retained for the 7D, but it was given 18 double heatsinks and had a traditional 13.5 tons of standard plate armor. The primary damage dealers for the 7D were a pair of ERPPCs split between the side torsos. All the other weaponry was short range, including 4 medium pulse lasers scattered across the torsos, a small laser set into the head, and 2 Streak SRM-4s split between the arms and fed by a single ton of case-protected ammunition in the right torso. The lasers and the ERPPCs were aided in their aim by a left torso-mounted targeting computer, giving the medium pulse lasers a -3 accuracy boost made the 7D dangerous to any light mechs who believed they could get close and bag themselves an assault mech. The 7D's 18 double heat sinks were more than enough to handle firing both ERPPCs while on the run, though choices would have to be made, as with most other stalkers, once the mech moved into close range. It's not tough to ride the curve though, just by holding off on one of the ERPPC shots. The Lyrans must have been paying attention because just 2 years later, in 3062, the Stalker 8S debuted, which featured not just a pair of ERPPCs but also a heavy Gauss rifle. Mass was purchased through the installation of a light fusion engine, and a number of double heat sinks was dropped to 16. The 13.5 tons of standard armor thankfully remained untouched. The previously mentioned ERPPCs were split between the arms and were quickly backed up by the heavy Gauss rifle, which was split between the right and center torsos. The rifle was fed by 3 tons of ammunition stored in the left torso, which is 12 shots total. At mid and then close range, 2 ER medium lasers split between the side torsos and 2 medium pulse lasers split between the arms could absolutely ruin someone's day, especially if that 8S was able to catch a target at 4 to 6 hexes and hit it with the heavy Gauss. No one wants to take 25 points of pinpoint damage on their battle mech. Its 16 double heat sinks were adequate for keeping the ERPPCs firing while on the run, but at close range, decisions will have to be made lest the cockpit become a UK house in 70-degree Fahrenheit weather. I hear it's intolerable. Overall, the 8S is a nice testbed for the heavy Gauss rifle, though I really would like to see a 4th ton of ammunition on it. I would even sacrifice a medium pulse laser for it and add a 3rd ER medium laser. What do you think? Now, we can't discuss the most recent variant of the Stalker without talking about the Stalker 2. By the 3130s, Irian Battlemechs Unlimited saw a need and made the decision that while the Stalker platform had been reliable, there were limits to what technology could be crammed into the antique frame. A design team was assembled to create not just a variant, but an entirely new battlemech which could be an inheritor of the Stalker legacy. The Stalker 2 remained at 85 tons and looked a lot like its predecessor, but otherwise it was an entirely new beast. Constructed around an Irian Class 38 endosteel chassis around a Strand 255 standard fusion engine, the Stalker 2 shaved off mass in a way that hadn't been attempted before. Some of that mass was invested in a 4.5-ton compact gyro, and much of the rest was spent on 27 tons of hardened armor. For the uninitiated, each point of hardened armor can take 2 points worth of damage. It also provided additional protection against specialized ammunition types. The drawback from such thick armor is a -1 to run speed, which dropped the movement profile for the Stalker 2 down to 340. It also added a +1 penalty to piloting skill rolls. This is a bigger problem than one might expect for a battlemech like the Stalker 2, which doesn't have any hand or lower arm actuators. Then again, it's only a problem if you ever fall down and need to get back up, so just don't ever fall down. Easy peasy. After adding 10 double heat sinks and the extra bits like a torso-mounted cockpit, the design team had to settle on the mech's loadout. After much debate, they settled on a pair of Irian Weapon Works extended LRM-10 launchers and 8 Magna Mark II standard medium lasers. The 2 ELRM launchers were split between the side torsos and each fed by their own 2 tons of Case 2 protected ammo. The 8 medium lasers were installed 2 in each arm, 2 in the center torso, and 2 in the head. Their accuracy was then improved with the installation of a targeting computer also located in the mech's head. The Stalker 2 proved to be a tough machine. It was quickly put to use during the Orient Protectorate invasion in 3138, among Capellan units on New Syrtis, and was even purchased by McCarran's armored cavalry and used against the Republic armed forces. Though slow and prone to being left helpless on its back like a flipped turtle, the Stalker 2 has apparently forged a fan base in the decades leading up to the Ilklan era. At the base of the first dropship's ramp, Andrew saw a lonely Metal Thunder mech, his brother's STK-3F Stalker, firing its large pulse laser at the fighters. As the Stalker turned rapidly back and forth, attempting to assist the infantry, Andrew noticed an odd hitch in the Stalker's right leg. His brother and the dropships were faring well against the fighter stars, but the tide would surely turn when the Jade Falcon's mechs arrived. And with only one battlemech and a damaged one at that, the fight would end quickly. Reign of Metal, Shrapnel, number 10, page 379, by Julian Michael Carver. Even though the Stalker 2 was accepted by some, the mech's drawbacks also led to calls for Irian to produce an alternative upgraded Stalker on the original platform. The customer might not always be right, but in this case, Irian was willing to listen. Their STK-3F Stalker variant is the most recent on the timeline, with a release date of 3142. Pulling out all the stops with advanced tech, Irian started with Endosteel, a light fusion engine, and once again employed 27 tons of hardened armor. There's simply no escaping that, sorry. At least the cockpit was once again in the head, and the gyro was standard. For weaponry, Irian took advantage of the ability to build large pulse lasers that matched clan quality, setting 2 into the mech, split between the side torsos. The 2 clan-grade LRM-10s and 2 SRM-6s had to be sourced from a trade deal with the Skate Khanate Beta AMAG, where a percentage of the 9F's production would be shipped their way. Each missile launcher was fed by its own single ton of ammunition, which was protected in the left and right torsos by Case 2. 4 standard medium lasers were split evenly between the arms in a nice callback to the original design, and all of the lasers were aided by the installation of a targeting computer in the left torso. The -3 accuracy boost for the 2 clan large pulse lasers makes the 9F a dangerous semi-mobile turret. Staying at range can save the opponents from the SRMs and medium lasers, but even then it's just a matter of time before those LPLs and LRM-10s wear you down. Getting through 36 points of hardened center torso armor before dying is a daunting task. If you're up for the frustration, give it a go. Let me know how you fare. As his cockpit heat slowly dropped, Archer unleashed his medium pulse lasers. Once more, the cockpit got hotter than a sauna as the emerald bursts stabbed at the Stalker, which reeled from the hits. Almost in slow motion, the mech turned, and Archer saw the missile hatches pop open for its deadly array of long and short-range missiles. His earpiece whined out the missile lock warning as 32 warheads of various sizes streaked toward him from the launch tubes. He activated his mech's anti-missile system and hunched his mech's back slightly to brace for the impacts meant to destroy his penetrator. Measure of a Hero, page 158, by Blaine Lee Pardoe. Before we wrap all this up, I did want to take a crack at creating my totally unofficial and non-canon Mechfrog variant for our friend the Stalker. Drawing an inspiration from the 9F, I decided to make an alt config that is similar but returns to standard plate armor. 16.5 tons of it, to be specific. Like the 9F, the MF Stalker carries a light fusion engine, but its 350 movement profile is supplemented with the inclusion of a supercharger in the center torso, which can boost it up to 360 in a pinch. While 1 MP is unlikely to make or break you in general use, it could be life-saving in the right circumstances. For weaponry, I retained the 9F's clan large pulse lasers and LRM-10s. Each missile launcher feeds from its own single ton of ammunition. Starting at mid-range, a plasma rifle set into the right arm can add additional 10 damage, plus the 1d6 heat effect to heat-synced targets. The rifle has 2 tons of ammunition stored in the right arm, which is more than most mech warriors can chew through in a single bout. Finally, 2 clan-grade SRM-6s were split between the arms, and they offer close-range conflict resolution. 1 ton of the standard ammo and 1 ton of Inferno munitions are included in the Case 2 protected left torso. The Stalker MF's 20 clan-grade double heat sinks can handle most of the heat generated in general use, though it can get warm if alpha striking. Firing everything except the SRM-6s will result in 0 residual heat if you're on the run. Adding in the SRM-6s for a full alpha strike will result in a +8 at the end of the turn. While obviously the Stalker 9MF benefits greatly from clan-grade technology, this is going to increasingly be the norm as we move further into the clan era. More and more inner sphere manufacturers are unlocking the secrets of clan tech, so get used to it. If you want to give the Stalker MF a try, I've included the record sheet for it in the video notes below. Don't forget to set the enemy battle mechs on fire early and often. So why do we love the Stalker? As far as classic big stompy mechs go, the Stalker marches, well, slowly lumbers into the spotlight as a powerful if slow addition to the pantheon. It pushes that opportunity cost table away from speed and toward armor and firepower, and if used wisely, those weapons can be punishing. While there are counters to the Stalker, including light mechs closing fast and circling it for rear shots, doing so requires the light mech warriors to be lucky a lot. The Stalker only has to be lucky once or twice before sending a light mech cartwheeling into oblivion. As advertised, the Stalker isn't pretty or flashy, but it will tend to stick around when other fancy battle mechs have stumbled. Just make sure you have a buddy around to help you get back up on your feet should you slip on the concrete. I'm curious what you think about the Stalker. Is it a favorite, or can you not get past the smile that only a mother could love? Is there a variant that you think represents the mech in its peak form? Let me know in the comments and we'll keep the discussion going. Thank you as always for coming by as we talked BattleTech, and thank you to those from the Mechfrog Discord who shared their painted mech minis. If you want to join us, I've included a link to the Discord server in the video notes below. If you enjoyed the video and feel it's worthy, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, and even hitting subscribe will make it much more likely you'll see my nonsense in the future. For those who have taken that extra step of becoming channel members or supported through Ko-fi, thank you. Without you, none of this would be possible. Until we meet again, please take care of yourself and your loved ones by making this world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.